Trigger warning, this podcast contains mature themes and discussions of cults, manipulation, and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking, where we expose the dark side of control, coercion, and the human stories behind them. I'm Anonymous Andrew, a podcaster and investigator.
And I'm Melody, a cult survivor and advocate for awareness and healing.
Greetings and welcome to another episode of Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Anonymous Andrew. And with me tonight is my co-host Melody. And we have a special episode for you tonight. Melody, take it away.
Today we're going to be joined by Ruwan Meepagala. He just told me how to pronounce it, and I'd been pronouncing it wrong. Author of the book ORGSM, a memoir. His story is a raw, firsthand account of his time inside OneTaste, the so-called orgasm meditation group that's been the focus of both the Netflix documentary and an ongoing federal investigation. Ruwan takes us deep inside the psychology of modern wellness cults and shares what really happens in the step-by-step process of indoctrination. We're so excited to have him here with us today to share his story and his insights with us. Ruwan, welcome to Cultimatum.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Oh, what a pleasure. And when Melody told me you were coming on, and of course, I apologize, but I'm going to be bringing up the Netflix documentary. When I watched the documentary, it was just phenomenal just to see. So, we've been doing this cult podcast for almost coming up on maybe a year and a half, 2 years now. And we've done so many different types of cults, but a lot of like Jehovah's Witnesses again and again. This cult that you were in, but just is amazing, and not in a good way, of course, but an amazing story. And so where would you like to start? This is your platform. We'd like you to come on here and tell your story.
I mean, if you want to talk about Netflix, we can. I mean, I've told the story so many ways. I'd be happy to follow your interest.
Let's start with that, and then we'll roll into your book. And yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, and I guess when we were off air, I said I didn't love the documentary because I had really high hopes that they would tell like a full nuanced story that wasn't just like, here's a setup and here's some sensationalist stuff, which I kind of felt like the documentary did. I'm only speaking from my perspective, honestly, but I sat in well over 10 hours of interviews with them. I told them everything, like the good, the bad, the different, like the all the different nuances of the cult. And I felt like they went for just like the most, I don't know, hot button, straight for the sensationalist stuff. That's what I was really upset about. And I also felt like it didn't really portray the cult realistically. It was like, here's some stuff, and then here's all this crazy stuff. The end. That's how I took it. But obviously I'm biased.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And I did watch it just a couple of nights ago. And from what I remember, you were not featured even all that much. So you said you sat down for 10 hours of interviews?
Yeah, I'm not a documentarian, but I think that's not that, maybe they use a small, less than 10% of each interview, I figured.
But you were a big part of that organization at one point, correct?
For the 2 years that I was in, I think I rose relatively quickly. I went all in. Basically, I'll tell my backstory going in, but like there were different stages where I was like resisting what we might call brainwashing, or I can see my mind being changed in retrospect. But when I was in, I went all in, and I did all the things I think one could do without committing his life to it within those 2 years.
You have a question?
I will say the most, I do. I would say the most interesting thing that I remember you saying on the documentary is that after you left, that you went through a period of time where you almost felt like you had fried your brain and that you didn't know if you'd come back from that. I'm assuming that your memoir is potentially about your healing process and your deconstruction from some of that brainwashing you felt that you endured. Could you kind of walk us through some of that?
Yeah, my book is more what I really try. My book's a nonfiction narrative. It's not. It's following my process from first person, and I did my best to show my thoughts as I slowly became brainwashed, like starting like very skeptical and then hesitant and then playing on the fence of like, well, cost benefit, maybe I should go a step deeper. And then you can see how my thoughts change chapter by chapter. I don't cover too much about what happened after. There's a bit on the epilogue that goes into the legal battles and like a brief part about my recovery process. But to what you just said, I just felt like I had downloaded. I mean, this is going to sound like cult language. I don't know how to put it in other terms, but I had changed the operating system in my mind, and I just didn't know how to fit in the real world anymore. Like nothing made sense. I couldn't hold the job. Like, and I'm sure maybe every cult member experiences this when they leave. My healing process was, honestly, I did blue collar work where I didn't have to think much and I could just like use my hands and like be present. I did acid a bunch of times. I'm not like promoting drug use, but was part of my healing process. And like doing my best to create connections, which to be honest, weren't as intense as the connections I had in the cults. I think maybe not all, but I know many ex-cult members from different groups. Like there is something, I hate to use the word special, but there's something unique about the bonds you make in a cult group because you're all brainwashed, obviously.
Okay, I would like to do something just in case the audience is not familiar with what we're talking about. So we just introduced you and we said there's a documentary on Netflix. I think it's called Orgasm Inc. And right off the bat, that sounds very sexual. So I think, and while it was a sex cult, I don't know if people understand. Would you like to, can you briefly walk us through just for a couple of seconds to tell the audience what transpired? What her name is Nicole Diadone. What? First, I want to ask you a question that I think nobody's asked, but I maybe the answer is obvious. Was this a cult or an MLM or just a scam, in your opinion?
Of those three, I would say it was a cult. Okay. I mean, it had some MLM features, I guess. And there were definitely scammy bits. But actually, I mean, one of my messages, and this kind of makes me unpopular in the ex-cult world, is that I did gain a lot of positive things. Like, and I don't know if it's true for other cults. I assume it is, but I haven't been in other cults. Is like the reason why I was able to be manipulated is that they did really genuinely help me, but then it came with strings attached. Of course. So anyway, I'm jumping ahead, but yeah, I could explain the sexual side if you'd like.
Let's go.
Yeah. So, all right, this is like the spiel of how I entered, but their business was a wellness organization focused on female sexuality. I discovered them because the founder did a TED Talk in 2007 titled Orgasm, The Cure to the Hunger in the Western Woman. I was 19, I watched TED Talks all the time. Orgasm, I clicked on it. It was not what I expected. It was more about human connection and vulnerability and things that as a 19-year-old emotionally shut down, anxious guy, I needed, but I didn't realize I needed. I clicked on Orgasm, right? And that's kind of like their marketing scheme in a nutshell, right? They hook people with the ideas of sex. They give you something more spiritual, if you will, and that's what gets you attached. In 2012, they were featured in Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Body, self-help book. They had a chapter on sexuality on their, they taught a specific technique called orgasmic meditation, which has a history in other cults, actually, going back to the 60s and maybe earlier. It's a practice where a man strokes a woman's vulva in a certain way, her clitoris specifically. And I mean, that was the business. And I showed up wanting to take these classes where I wasn't sure, is it like a sex class? Is it a communication class? But then I entered the community and here's this alternate universe of people who live totally different than normal people. And slowly I got sucked in.
So that's why I asked you the question earlier about, and by the way, let's just say that a cult, an MLM, and a scam basically are all interchangeable because a cult leader is a scammer and an MLM and a cult are basically the same thing. It's just how it's structured. But this woman created a technique in which she was able to she came up with this idea where, like you said, a man can stroke a woman's clitoris and they can have these orgasms for 15 minutes to 30 minutes. and they showed them on the documentary, and these women were like going off into La La Land, and it became very popular. There was an influx of people that wanted to join. What point was did did she start charging? Because that's when the prices started going up, because it was just very little at the beginning, and then it was $10,000, $20,000, $36,000. Can you explain that level of it? Because that's where I think the MLM comes in.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, because a lot of this happened before I was there, but um, the founder was involved in other cults such as Morehouse and other groups that had sexual techniques like this. Allegedly, I haven't been able to confirm this, but I've heard this from other like old time ex cult members. But Est, which eventually became Landmark Education, Scientology, and Morehouse all had similar roots, like Vic Barranco, L. Ron Hubbard, and Werner Erhard. I've heard from multiple sources were buddies back in the 60s. That's why the groups use each other's terminology. Actually, like OneTaste used a couple terms from Scientology, and they were all mixed up, in terms of their communication skills, let's say. As far as I understand, Nicole tried to teach classes that were more about the mind and like mind control or changing your mind, like more in like a, let's say, trippy Tony Robbins style. That didn't work. So she went back to the roots of sexuality, and she took this previous practice that Morehouse did called deliberate orgasm, which was like way more intensive. It could last for hours, and basically repackaged it into this 15-minute orgasm thing. And that's one of the things that allowed it to be more successful than its predecessors.
Yeah, that seemed to bring in not just lay people or maybe even upper echelon, but celebrities, right? There were celebrities. Yeah. I think Gwyneth Paltrow got involved at some point. Yeah. And yeah, okay. All right. So did you answer the question why you didn't like the documentary or didn't think it was portrayed the way you thought it should be?
Well, yeah, like, again, I only know what I said to them. I felt like they had the raw material to tell a really full story, which I do cover in my book, like to show the light and the dark and how things were interwoven. I felt, obviously biased as a person who's in the group and in the documentary. They said a bunch of facts and then they went straight for the weird stuff without context. I do know that they had some legal troubles because OneTaste was threatening them with like injunctions and stuff. And they also, I think, had a hard time finding women willing to speak in the documentary. So it was like, I think it was one woman, like 4 guys, which was at least strange from my experience because it was a female run organization. It always seemed like there were more women, definitely more women in leadership positions. So I just felt like the documentary didn't really give a clear or an accurate portrayal of what the cult was. It was just like these random facts about it.
Right. And what I came away with when I watched that was I got to be careful how I choose my words now. It seemed like an organized spiritual TED Talk orgy where women came in and they came in to experience was it called the OM, the orgasm meditation?
Orgasmic meditation, yeah.
Right. And they did that. And so the men would perform this on the woman. And it was almost like women were lining up to have this done to them because it was a sensational trip that they were going through, which do you know if this was real? I mean, obviously you're not a woman, and you never experienced what Nicole was doing. Like, so you don't have a clitoris, I'm saying, so you can't experience it. Was this real?
As far as I can tell, and one of the ways she packaged it, or like explained the benefits to men, is that like as a man, you would learn empathy with such precision that you would feel some version of what she's feeling in your body. And I know that sounds very spiritual and crazy, but like, and it was exaggerated in OneTaste, but there's a big part of that that was true also. Like I became very comfortable with women, and I will say secondhand, I saw a lot of women go through it. And other than the ones who went deep enough in OneTaste to get traumatized, a lot of women did benefit. Like a lot of women, fixed their sexual hangups or were able to experience pleasure or maybe got over some past trauma. If you stayed long enough, though, they re-traumatized you with something else. But like, I
saw that
there was a window,
Yeah, I saw that. There was a couple of scenes where some women really went into a meltdown. like they were having a problem with, I guess, past traumatic experiences that was rebrought. It wasn't a lot, but they showed both sides that while many women were enjoying it and getting a lot out of it, spiritually and physically and metaphysically and all that, but there were some women that didn't. Correct?
Well, I would say specifically the women that worked for OneTaste, because like, I've said this a lot, that if I left after 6 months, and I think this is true for most OneTaste people who are in OneTaste, around, like, if you leave at 6 months, it's probably 90% positive, because you're getting all the benefits in the beginning, but very few people can leave at 6 months because you're getting so much love and validation, and maybe they cured my anxiety and my sexual dysfunctions. Like, how could I possibly leave? Which is what made me commit my life, stop working elsewhere, go deeper and deeper, and then it flips at some point. It's like 90% bad, but you can't leave anymore.
Is that where the money came in? So you were hooked. So did you have to pay more to stay, or you were staff? What part did you
Well,
play?
I mean, my there was a few layers, right? Like, I went to an intro event, which is $10. It's just like, there's tons of intro events in New York City, but I start going regularly. I start going, instead of going to other places, I eventually take the $100 class, which is basically an indoctrination event. Like, you pay $100, you learn this technique, but most of the day is getting you bought into their worldview and philosophy, and they change definitions of words. Like, the word orgasm becomes something different. You learn all this terminology. It's like your first intro into being indoctrinated. But then the next big step was I signed up for a $15,000 coaching program. I was already kind of broke, so I didn't have that money. But that was like the big leap, and I eventually lived in their house. So around the time that I started working for them, I almost couldn't function in the real world. Like, I ended up getting fired by my job anyway, but like, I just didn't want to live in the real world. I want to do everything OneTaste. And the people who work for OneTaste, they work for almost nothing. Some people work for free. And the real cost for myself, and I think a lot of people, is that you just like volunteer for OneTaste all day, every day. Like, you don't have a job, you don't have income. That was more damaging than paying for money, or as damaging.
Okay, I see. I think Melody has a question, but before we get to her, real quickly, have you heard of the Twin Flames universe cult?
Sounds familiar. It's like a tantra cult.
It's an online cult where they promise you that they'll find your soulmate for you, and it's very set up like with you. So you come in, you take courses, you take the $100 course, you take the $1,000 course, and then you become a coach, and then it's like another MLM, and you come in and you start paying, and then you have to get people to come in and work underneath you, and it builds up and it builds up. It's all a scam, and of course the whole idea is that they find you a soulmate, and they never do. And the FBI raided them last month. Literally, they raided the compound in Michigan. They grew up so big, but it sounds almost a little bit like a little bit. So I wanted to know if you were familiar. Melody, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I was wondering, I mean, you may not know the answer to this. Do you think that this leader's tactics were deliberate, or do you think that you saw a change in her from going from inspiring to controlling? Did you witness that, or was that something that you weren't there for?
If that shift happened, it was probably either before I was there or before I was close enough to see anything. But honestly, from what I understand now, I think it was deliberate from the beginning. Like, just the way that they planned the business, and in the way that her inspiration was used to manipulate people. And like, the OneTaste term was hooking, like what a hooker does, like to create attachment under false pretenses.
Right.
Like, everything she did was, I'm going to help you, and now you're more attached to me. And yeah, I feel, I don't know what's in her head, obviously, but I'm fairly certain it was deliberate from the beginning. Even things like that we were
Okay.
taught on staff, like, you only have to sell hot girls, because if you get hot girls, you get everybody else spending money, right? Like, that kind of thing was so
Yeah.
explicit that I don't think I don't think they lost their way necessarily, but I don't know what's in her head. I will say, though, that other than Nicole, and even her co-defendant, who was also convicted, Rachel, who I was very close to, she was my mentor in the cult. Everyone else, as far as I can tell, really was doing it out of pure, like they really thought, out of devotion, they really thought they were helping people, doing the best thing for people. If anyone was pulling the puppet strings knowingly, it was Nicole.
And
Well,
that does sound deliberate. That sounds like a sales tactic, right? To get hot girls.
well, and that's what Jeffrey Epstein did. I mean, and some of the other high profile sex party guys. You bring in the cream of the crop, and you're going to get. I mean, that's not something new. Obviously, Nicole is like any other cult leader. She knew what she was doing. When I watched her and her TED talks, she was brilliant, and most cult leaders are. They're high IQs. They're brilliant. They have mastermind. They're geniuses, but they're control freaks, and they're power hungry and control freaks, and ultimately that's their downfall. So,
Yeah.
okay, Mel, did you have another question?
I was wondering if you do you act was there an actual moment or event where you actually realized, whoa, this might be a cult? And if so, what kind of was that
Well,
aha moment for you?
there wasn't a single moment. Like I kind of mentioned, there was layers, because I mean, even when I was deciding to take my first class with them, even this was like late 2012. If you Googled One Taste, the third autofill was One Taste cults. Like, so there was enough about it being a cult online that like I wasn't going in completely blind. But the whole time from the beginning and in different stages, I was like, well, seems like a pretty good cult, or it seems like they help people more than hurt people. Oh, of course, everything has bad reviews. Like there was enough to I could rationalize taking the next step. Of course, the next layer, you find out more of the dark stuff, but every time I'd be so much more invested, some cost fallacy. So there wasn't one time. There was the first time, there was when I started working for the staff and saw how they mixed sex with sales, and that felt weird. But by then, as I mentioned, my first 6 months were so amazing. I'd gotten so much help and value that I was like, well, that kind of outweighs this weird sex stuff they used to do to make sales. And then, you know, so there were many stages where it was always balanced out enough that I stayed or took the next.
So then what was the thing that finally did make you leave? I'm probably jumping a little ahead in your story, but
No,
was there
it's
one
fine.
thing?
Yeah, well, so all right, I was becoming fairly prominent in the One Taste community because I was a mentee of the second in command, Rachel, who was convicted, and I was in One Taste media a lot. Like I think I had a lot of influence in the OM community, the One Taste community, but I didn't want to commit my life to them. And at a certain point of authority, I assume this is true in all cults, but at a certain point of influence, I had to be extra committed. Otherwise, I'm a liability. So they were giving me a lot of pressure to basically commit my life, because the people who are really deep in, they're called lifers. They've committed their life and it's clear they're never going anywhere else. And that was the one thing I couldn't do. Honestly, I was brainwashed enough that I probably would have stayed another couple of years, but they were putting so much pressure on me to like really declare my life, like my life's devotion to them. And I just couldn't do that. I mean, the specific straw was I reached out to Nicole about writing a book with her. Funny enough, it was an early version of what has now become my book, but I was going to write it with her. It was going to be kind of a promotional thing for One Taste about how amazing my One Taste journey has been, basically. And that would give me direct access to Nicole. And I think because most people have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to have direct access to Nicole, that was kind of skipping the line, so to speak, or jumping layers in the pyramid. So I really had to commit my life. And because I wouldn't do that, they pushed me all the way out. But if I didn't get that kind of
Okay.
ultimatum, I maybe would have. Honestly, I wouldn't. I'm glad I left when I did, but I probably would have stayed another couple of years.
Wow.
I
Wow,
would.
that's interesting.
It's this whole thing is interesting. It's fascinating. I was fascinated. Believe me, when Melody told me you were the guest, I was very excited. I want to explore the cultic mechanisms within a modern sex positive framework. What am I talking about? You write about how empowerment language and consent culture were used to mask control. How did that manipulation work in practice?
Um, well, that exact wording, I want to be honest, like I think my publicist wrote that, so I don't know exactly what she was referring to. But if I'm going off of what comes to mind, is
Whatever
that
comes to mind.
Well, I'll say, all right. So zooming out, one of the things they did really well in terms of marketing, and you could even argue this contributed to the positive healing at times, was that they made it a really safe space for women. Like Once's predecessors were very patriarchal cults, like man in charge, the man decided the whole sexual thing, and Nicole really put a feminist spin on everything. Women basically controlled the ohm, even though they were the ones on their back getting stroked. Like, and there's a lot of ritual built into how it was done, such that women felt extra safe. And I think that's how she got so many, mainstream women to try this practice. It didn't seem that weird for something that's quite weird, right? I mean, she made it as not weird as possible and put a lot of empowerment in women's hands. Like things like yeah, consent was very strongly honored, at least in the beginning. As you went deeper in, you found out that the things they told you in the beginning don't apply once you're actually in. But in the beginning, in like the first phases, it seems like everything's all about, women's safety and freedom and everyone being able to do what they want and say no when you need to, and all of those things. So that, I think, also added to like, wow, I feel so safe and understood and loved here and like so respected here. Well, now they're pressuring me to do this thing. Well, I have 6 months or more of positive experiences. I'll do this one thing. I'll go against my moral compass this time, and then slowly, another 6 months later, you're a totally different person.
So Nicole, being a female of the female gender, and it's very rare to find a female cult leader, right? I can't even think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure there were several. She was the one that was able to bring, like you said, bring in and make the. So in the cult world, the way they get you to come in, they love bomb you, right? They make you feel safe, and they make you feel you're welcome and you're part of the community, and everything. We're going to take care of you. And everything's going to be okay. And what you're telling me is that this is how it went down until she got her claws into you, and once you were in, then everything changed. Then the love bombing stopped. So
Yeah. Well, one example actually is like, so on opening night of my coaching program, which is like the year-long program, like that was like really deep indoctrination, the $15,000 program. On the first night, she said she goes over like I think it comes from the BDSM world, like red, yellow, green in terms of consent, like because we did emotionally intense things. If you call yellow, it means you want to slow down. If you call red, like we have to stop the game or whatever's happening. And that was like really emphasized in the beginning. By the last or one of the last coaching program emergence, like maybe 9 months later, she said only beginners call red, which meant like if you're someone who wants things to stop, you're not enlightened enough or you haven't grown enough. Like there's something wrong with you. So like the whole game was flipped by the time you
so
got to
if
that
you were
point.
advanced, you couldn't stop. You couldn't call red.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. The really advanced people just go with anything. And you're like, oh, well, that's kind of true. It's so you kind of go along with things that you don't want to do.
So non-consent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, as you can imagine, between your publicist Melody and I both doing research and both watching the documentary, we have pages and pages of questions. But when we're just going to pick out the ones that I think we can get you to answer tonight in a good amount of time. So I would like to give you some. We're about halfway through, maybe. Yeah, I'd like to give you some time to talk about your book. The book is called ORGSM, a memoir, correct?
Yep. I have a proof copy here. I don't know if the video is going to be visible.
Yeah, we'll put this on the video. And I'd like to. Okay. We're just missing Melody. Okay. But we'll figure something out. So you said this book fills in what Netflix left out. What's the biggest misconception that the public still has about OneTaste?
But would join it the way they portray. Felt like it wasn't enough, and which I think it was the ring stage by stage, and it had a dark side. I felt like they went straight for the weird stuff, and it just seemed so out of context to me.
Well, they had a documentary to make, and they had to pull in an audience, and they're going to use sensationalism, right?
I felt like it could have added more context and made it build better.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I'm
Yeah.
just saying,
Yeah.
look at from the side of a producer and what's going to bring in the audience. And in in our world, sex sells, right? So they're gonna sensationalize it. So
I agree 100%. And I know because I'm a cult survivor. I know what you're talking about. And have you seen The Vow? Have you watched that one? I think it's on HBO,
That's the
and
fictional
it's about
series.
the Nexium cult. It's about the Nexium cult.
Ah, oh,
Um,
Nexium. Okay.
and that they do a really good job of exactly what you're talking about. I think what this is what I think he's trying to say, Andrew, and you tell me if I'm wrong, Ruwan. I'm gonna kind of paraphrase what I think you're trying to say is that they when you are in a cult, you want someone to understand how you got pulled into it. You don't want to just jump to the sensational stuff and all that other stuff, because that's one of the things people ask is, well, how did you get involved in this, or why would you get involved in this? And that's usually a very slow indoctrination process, and they just didn't want to take the time to show how that works and how somebody gets sucked into that. And it is a process, and there are Wild Country did it well, The Vow did it well. There are some cult documentaries that do that very well, where, like you're saying, you can watch it and say, oh, I can see how someone joined that, whereas you feel that they didn't do that with OneTaste. So you feel like they just jumped right in, and people watch it and are like, well, why would anybody join that? Is that
Exactly.
kind of accurate to what
Well
you're
said.
feeling?
Yeah, definitely.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Don't go anywhere. More Cultimatum is coming up.
there
Ah.
was a gentleman in the Netflix documentary that I don't remember his name, and I don't want to describe him, but I have to somehow, because you'll know who he is. He was semi-tall, kind of stocky, bald, and
Mhm.
he was a loner. Like when they introduced him, he was very shy, and he did. Oh, what was his name?
Chris.
Okay, he wasn't very good with women, right? He at the
Mhm.
very beginning they portrayed him as a loner, as a maybe even as a virgin, I think. And somehow he heard about Nicole's TED Talks or whatever and got involved, and then he became the master. They showed that there was a dungeon at some point, right? A B&E
Oh yeah.
dungeon. Yeah. So is that the man I'm talking about?
That was out of context too. I was actually thinking of that scene because I think that was just that had nothing to do with OneTaste. I mean, it had very little to do with OneTaste.
So that was
honestly.
since they extorted that.
I think that is one of his hobbies. I mean, OneTaste did dabble in BDSM, but it wasn't like a OneTaste thing. And I believe the warehouse where OneTaste started later became a BDSM dungeon.
Okay.
I think those things weren't connected, honestly, as far as I know. I think they were just. I think he thought he was just sharing, like, oh, these are some things I'm into. Like
That's
that didn't
so
really
it was
have
an
anything to do
after
with
fact. This
OneTaste.
had nothing to do with what
Little to
Nicole's,
do. I mean,
right.
OneTaste did dabble with that stuff, but it wasn't what OneTaste was about.
Okay. All right. Back
Yeah.
to your book. This is a personal question, and feel free to say pass. Do you have any trauma in your background that drew you to this cult?
Not well. I think I was very susceptible emotionally to find a group that offered connection and healing and stuff. I mean, as far as like trauma, like I wasn't like molested as a child or anything. Actually, someone in the book I have quoting asking me that because I had like trauma like symptoms. I didn't have those kinds of experiences. I think I was just raised to be emotionally shut down and anxious, and therefore willing to try anything to get out of that terrible feeling.
Writing a memoir about trauma can reopen old wounds. What was the hardest chapter to write, and what helped you process it?
The hardest part, well, so I attended the federal trial back in May, and I didn't know I wasn't called to testify. Actually, the defense, believe it or not, subpoenaed me to testify. They didn't call me to the stand, but I knew most of the people who testified for the prosecution. Some of the people I knew very well. Some of those people are in my book, and reading their testimony and then going back to the scenes they were referring to in the book was very difficult. Like, it just added, because when I've been working on this book for over a decade, like it's become like fictionalized. It became kind of fictionalized in my mind. Like, I started thinking of the people that I knew as characters, and even myself as a character. But then reading their real testimony, knowing that these are people I have really cared about, still processing trauma, still affected by these things, to then write about it again brought it up in a different way. And on that, by the time the trial happened, like, the book was basically done. I was kind of just editing, but writing the epilogue, the final chapter where I referenced the trial, was quite difficult for that reason.
So her trial. So let's clarify that, because at the end of the documentary, they said she fled the country, but then there was a little blurb at the end saying that she was seen in the country recently. Has she been charged? Has she been indicted? Has she?
Oh, she's in
been...
prison right now. She's been convicted.
So that documentary is outdated.
Yeah, the documentary is from 22. In 2023, she was indicted. She went to trial last May 25.
Okay.
I think it was like a 2-week trial, and she was convicted. I mean, she was found guilty and then immediately remanded. So she's been in prison. She hasn't had her final sentencing yet. Yeah.
I did not know that.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
You know, it's been one of these things I've debated with a lot of my ORGSM friends. It's like, you know, when you think about the positive times, you're like, well, she did some bad things, but is it really a federal crime? And then you think about the harm she's caused. It's like, well, who cares what the law is? Like, she's really hurt people, right? I felt kind of mixed about it, even when the trial was going on. But then I went back and read all the court transcripts, and honestly, I don't think it's as gray as I previously thought. Like, you know, the one thing I still feel mixed about is her co-defendant, Rachel, who I mentioned was my mentor in the cult, took part in many harmful things, but I know she did it out of genuine devotion. Like I mentioned before, like, I know she did it because she decided whatever Nicole told her to do was her spiritual path. And she, you know, even going to jail with her is like a spiritual brave thing. And I'm not saying that, you know, just following orders obviously is not a defense, but I feel mixed about her going to jail for that reason.
Well, she's
I can understand that.
Yeah. I do too. I absolutely understand that. Being so devout to your leader, Jesus, look at Jesus. Yeah. I mean, people are still following this guy around. Right. Don't get me started. Okay, but Mike, I'm questioning at the end. So the documentary is outdated. I should say outdated. It was out in 2022. It said that she had re-entered the country. Is that when they got her? Is that she came back in because she fled to a country where they couldn't extradite? And at the time, she
was in Bali for a while.
Right.
Yeah, Indonesia doesn't extradite, so those were the rumors.
Why did she come
back? I don't know. Obviously, her database. I think. I mean, one thing that was revealed during the trial, and I could speak about some of the things they did in media. Like, they obviously live in their own world, have a ton of hubris. She has a ton of hubris. Like, I think she thought at that time that there's no way they're gonna be able
to
indict
untouchable.
her, which is wrong.
Yeah,
because I will say, like, so during the trial, they hired a PR guy who I guess is like, you know, done PR for Harvey Weinstein. Her lawyer was actually Harvey Weinstein's lawyer, you know, so that kind of person. They put out a bunch of, you know, the PR guy put out, honestly, I mean, a lot of hit pieces about people who spoke out against them. I was waiting for one about me. It never came for some reason. But they even did a hit piece about the judge while the trial was going on, which just, I mean, it just makes no, like, why would you ever do that, right? Like, why would you want to anger the judge, you know? But they, I mean, other
to
things
discredit
like that,
him. Like, it was to discredit him, I guess.
That was a woman, yeah.
Okay.
But while the trial was going on, like, obviously the judge is going to read that. Like, do you really want the judge to be angry at you while I mean, things, there's a lot of other little things like that, but clearly it revealed that either Nicole or her advisors or the whole group, they're not quite on Earth. So they just, I would assume, threw caution to the wind with all of these things.
Fascinating. I'm just fascinated by the whole thing. Your subtitle mentions what Netflix didn't show. Could you give us one example that still haunts you or surprises you to this day?
About my experience, or specifically what should have been in
What
Netflix?
Netflix didn't show that you wish they did, and it surprises or haunts you to this day. And if there's nothing, there's nothing. I might be
Yeah,
digging.
not specifically that. I mean, the things that I wish Netflix show were what Melody described. I mean, that in general. I'll say one thing that One Taste did mention that's haunted me is, when you talk about like your conscious ring and warning bell. There was a thing in One Taste. They had a whole terminology for all different types of communication. Maybe all cults do, but one thing was called killing. It's where you kind of like emotionally batter someone so bad that they can't respond, like kind of like a mic drop, but like traumatizing, let's say. And I remember, even though I was very indoctrinated at the time, I was sitting in a meeting where one of my colleagues, who ended up testifying, and she's in my book, a character based on her is in my book, was killed, and I did nothing. I just
Wow.
sat there, and in that moment, as indoctrinated as I was, I felt like this is really fucked up.
Yeah.
But I couldn't say something because everything in my ideology was convincing me, like, no, this is for her own good, or she needs to have a little, tough love. But I think she is 12 years later still traumatized from that incident, among other things that led up to it. And that is something that haunts me personally.
I mean, sure,
Yeah.
I can understand why. Anything else about your book you want to tell us? That I keep referring it to Netflix. Talk about your book. Forget Netflix. Tell us about why the audience would go out and buy the book.
Well, the thing I'm the most proud of, I worked a long time on this book, is that, well, I'll say it's funny. It goes through all the emotions. I tried to share with the reader the emotions I was going through, like the fun, the excitement, the wonder, the enchantment, the doubts, and the thing I'm most proud of is that I think as you read it, you can see the narrator getting brainwashed chapter by chapter to the point where it really shows you, okay, this is how brainwashing happens, along with all the dilemmas, the ethical things. Do I want to go in? Do I want to keep believing in the magical thinking that they believe or not? Like, this is what I think, this is what I'm most proud of in my book, and I haven't seen in other books like this. And I also cover the relevant parts of the history of One Taste, but it's mostly my experience. Like, I started this book thinking I was going to write like a man's Eat, Pray, Love, where it was like, all tidy and rosy at the end, but then I found something much darker, even though it started that way.
Are you in touch with Nicole today?
No. I mean, I saw her at the trial.
Did I speak to her? Did she look at you? Was there any body language?
She looked and was surprised. Her lawyer was surprised I was sitting there. Rachel, I think someone told her I was there, so she looked the other way when she walked in the courtroom. But no, I don't be allowed to communicate to me. I will say, before she was indicted, she passed on a message through a third party that she would pay me not to put out my book. And I said no. That was like the last time we communicated in any way.
I think that's a pretty critical piece of information. She asked you not to publish the book and for a price.
Yeah, she didn't say it to me directly. She found a mutual acquaintance who would say, like, Nicole would pay you, They also sent me, One Taste also sent me threats that way too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very
I mean,
revealing.
it's a kind of ridiculous threat, but they said because I didn't want to help them, I didn't want to provide them, because they're suing one of the people who spoke out against them in the documentary. They wanted me to provide evidence to help them in their case. I told them to F off. And because of that, they were saying they were going to pull strings, basically to have me extradited from Peru and like basically have criminal charges against me somehow. But I think it was a pretty ridiculous threat, but someone thought that would intimidate me, I guess.
Is that where you are now, Peru?
No, I'm in New York now.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in New York. Okay. When did you go to Peru?
I was living there with my wife and kids for 2 years.
Okay.
We're actually in the process of moving to Spain. We're in New York for a few months.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Mel, anything?
Yeah. What have you learned about human nature that through all of this that maybe surprised you the most?
Well, there's a few. I mean, well, I'll say in the big picture, and this is actually something that comes out in dialogue in my book, is that before One Taste, I think most people assume that someone with like really nearly magical powers to read you and help you, or one of the characters in the book says like see into your soul, you would have assumed that they must be a good person, right? Someone like Amma the hugging saint, or someone like who could really touch you in a profound way, you would assume must must be pure of heart if they can do that. In One Taste, it became very clear that that's just not true. Like there are people who have incredible abilities to affect each other, and they could be morally corrupt. And it has nothing, and I will say, like, and this is something I tried to toe the line with throughout the book, because there are a lot of experiences that were kind of paranormal, kind of magical. I know at certain sometimes some theatrics were heightened to give people a feeling of enchantment, but there are other times like their front end product was pretty legitimate in my end. Like you did experience kind of wild sexual things and like intuitive things that I still can't really explain 10 years later. And I experienced all of that, and that was part of what obviously led to the enchantment. To more directly answer your question, there are things that the human mind and body are capable of that I would not have thought possible prior to One Taste, and some of these things I can't explain years later, and that was part of the crazy upside.
I have 3 questions, and so we're going to begin to wrap up. And I have 3 questions, but one of them is what
Well, actually,
Melody.
sorry, can I say one last
Sure,
thing about
absolutely.
Melody's questions? To make it more concise, like the principles of changing a person for good or brainwashing them for bad are basically the same principles. That's like the trippiest thing that I learned in
Mm.
that experience. Like
Oh,
the same
that's
ways they
deep.
helped
Yeah.
people. Yeah. I rambled in my
Yeah, that's
first answer. I wanted to
interesting.
put a bow
No,
on it.
I like that. That kind of narrows it down a little bit. And what that does, as I'm assuming, it is when you leave, it creates a lot of trust issues, which is very common in people who leave many cults, is that you leave with a lot of trust issues.
Yeah, and as someone like myself who's been obsessed with personal development for my almost entire life, it made me very jaded about personal development because I was in a personal development cult and I saw
Oh,
some really dark
yeah.
things happen from people being helped.
Yeah, that would be, that's that. And that's very similar to what religious cults do with religion. They use that same methodology to control you. And then when you leave, you're like, can I even go back into this? Can I even be part of religion or whatever? Yeah, that's interesting because that's the question that Andrew was going to ask at the end. That he's like, I don't even know if this fits, which is about where is your faith today? But yeah,
Hmm.
that's very
Yeah.
interesting. That's a good.
At the end of every episode, especially if it's a religious cult, I ask the ex-member who fled the cult where their faith is today. Do they believe in God? Do they not? Do they have a spirituality? It just didn't kind of seem to fit with yours because yours did not deal with the deity, with any kind of um, heaven or hell or God. I know it dealt with the spirituality of the connection of the mind and the body and all that, but since leaving, you've become a coach and a writer focused on unconscious sexuality. How did you rebuild your identity in leaving a high control group centered on intimacy?
Well, I'll say, and related to Melody's last question, I had to take a long break from it because I learned how to coach while I was on the coaching staff at One Taste. But the way that they taught us how to help people also created dependence. Is that same thing I was saying earlier? So I was like, I don't know how to help someone without taking away their free will. Like, I mean, I wasn't
Yep.
choosing to do that, but that was how I learned how to, help someone through a real problem. So I had to take a break for years before I could get back into it, even though it's still my passion. And now I've gotten back into it. I think taking time separate, studying with other people that weren't cult leaders was important, and that helped me identify the gold, or sift through the gold from the dirt, so to speak.
Okay, so and I have one more, and Melody has a question. Then I have one more, and I can ask. But what do you want to? Is there anything that you want to promote today other than the book? Is there a practice or coaching business that you're doing today?
Yeah, I coach mostly men, mostly around relationships or dating. I've kind of moved away from sexuality specifically, for various reasons, but yeah, I mean, I would say the thing I really want to talk about is the book. I mean, if you're listening to this, you're
Yeah.
probably most interested in my
Okay,
book.
good.
If you're interested in coaching too, I have programs and stuff, mostly for men. But yeah, I think the book is really what you should check out.
My other podcast is a dating podcast, so we can have you over there. We'll talk about coaching
Cool.
and the book. So I'll
Great.
give you a double dose. I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to throw it over to Melody. She can ask the final question, and then we'll say goodbye. We'll ask you where we can find all your information. This is going to be an interesting one for you. And again, you can pass. If Nicole was listening to this interview today, what would you want her to hear?
Well, I don't know. Nothing specific is coming to mind, but I do kind of want her to read my book, because
Fair enough.
even though I think she'd be upset that I wrote the book and included what I included, I think she would also find it interesting.
Yeah, offered to pay you not to publish the book. Like,
yeah. I think that's a good answer.
That's a great answer.
So I'll end with my final question, which is, what advice would you give someone who might be realizing they're in too deep with a transformational or healing type community?
I would say no one has a monopoly on spirituality, or whatever the thing is you think you're getting from the cult. I'll speak from my own experience. Like, I felt like they were the only people in the world who understood sexuality and intuition and human connection the way that they did. And they did have a unique thing, but you can find it other places. I remember for myself, when I thought about going out into the real world again, before I got my ultimatum to leave, I just didn't think I would ever find happiness or deep friendships or anything outside of the cult, because it was such a unique, high octane version of that in the cult. But you can actually get that. And it is worth leaving, even though your first months are going to be difficult. Leaving a cult is like a breakup times however many people you were that bonded to. So I guess that's a long way of saying it can get better, and the things that you think you're going to lose, you can find again outside of the cult.
Excellent answer.
Excellent answer. Yeah.
Ruwan, I would actually like to answer your question that you weren't going to answer about spirituality, if that's all right.
Sure. Okay, so where are you today in your spirituality?
Yeah, because like you said, it wasn't like there was a deity, but actually, when you got in deep enough, they did talk about God, and like as silly this sounds, like the word orgasm, the definition would change as you went in deeper. Like, it goes from being, orgasm is not what you think it is. That's the male definition of orgasm. Orgasm is this, high sensation flow state. And then orgasm becomes kind of like chi. It's like the sensation you can feel. And then it becomes like the Tao. It's like the way of the universe. And then it becomes God. Like, so it actually became like, the orgasm told me to do this, or the orgasm wants this of me. So it did actually, when you were deep in enough, it did actually become as religious, let's say. And for me specifically, what was challenging is that in one of the benefits I got, you could say spiritual benefits, was that I learned to trust my feelings for the first time in my life. That ended up getting warped in the cult, because they modified what you're feeling. So like, you learned how to trust your feelings. Now we're going to make you feel this thing, which usually involves sleeping with someone or doing something to make the business money. And then it gets all messed up. But there is actually a beautiful truth in trusting your feelings. And it took me a long time to learn how to actually trust my feelings again. So to answer the question, it's I try to. It's not like, I mean, how do I put this? The mode of spirituality that I adopted in OneTaste, I try to keep, but I don't have that as my only lens on reality. Like I do, I do act out of faith sometimes, and there's something beautiful about that.
I'll take it one step further and make it simple for you. Are you a practicing fill in the blank? Christian, Jew, Buddhist?
No, but since I have two small children, I've been trying to find something bigger than what I think in my own head to have some sort of culture for my children. I was raised Catholic and Buddhist, so neither one really stuck. Oh, cool.
Not Buddhist, but Roman Catholic. Okay.
So no, not really, but I've been meditating a lot lately.
Good.
Yeah.
Wow, Ruwan, we so appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this with us and our audience. It's been very eye-opening, and I'm glad to hear you speak, because I think there's a lot of truth in what you say about the documentary that I agree with you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
No, thank you. Tell us, okay, so we can imagine your book, Orgasm Memoir, is on Amazon. Where else can we send the audience to? Do you have a website?
My website's Ruwando.com. On Instagram, I'm at Ruwando. And actually, the book comes with a bunch of bonuses, like some free, paid courses that I'm making free if you buy the book. If you go to orgasmbook.com, so that's without the A, ORGSM book.com. You can buy the book, send your receipt there, and get a bunch of bonuses from me.
Why did you leave the A out?
It's a silly reason, but one, I thought if I wanted to run ads, they wouldn't get flagged as opposed to the word orgasm. I don't think that's true. AI knows what I'm trying to say. And then the idea just got stuck, like, oh, well, I could put the A from the second part of the title in there. That's basically the reason.
Orgasm, a memoir. So that's where the A is.
Yeah, I don't know if that landed, but that's what I went with.
I got it. I got it. So it worked. It worked.
Okay, great.
All right. Seriously, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks again.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
Think about coming on digital dating, because I think we can get you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Great.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Great.
And once again, we want to thank Ruwan for coming on the show and sharing his unique experience with all of us. Wow, Andrew. It was, because I had to go back and rewatch the documentary because it had been a couple of years, 2-3 years since I'd watched it. And I knew exactly what he was talking about with what he didn't like about it. So I don't think it's that he didn't like it at all. I just think he thinks that they could have done it better.
Oh, of course. And I bet you've interviewed several, and we've had a couple of people that have been on the show that have been on documentaries, and I don't remember exactly what they said, but
sometimes people don't like the way they're edited,
because he said he sat there for 10 hours and then if I remember, he was really, I think, maybe a couple of minutes here and there they interviewed him. I mean, they showed his scene. So let me just give you my take. So when you told me he was coming on and to go watch the documentary, my first gut reaction, because I had not heard of this cult, was, is this a cult? Because I'm thinking sex cult. Then the first thing I thought of was NXIVM and Jeff Epstein and Harvey Weinstein and all them, because I don't know if they were cults, but they were sex-based kind of organizations where
NXIVM was definitely a cult.
Okay.
If you watch The Vow on HBO, definitely a cult.
That is on my list to do, and we should probably cover that one day. But as I began to watch it, I was actually enamored by her, but that's her charm, right, Nicole?
Yes.
So yeah, she pulled me in. But then, of course, that's when it started falling apart. So, and then I understood that this is absolutely a cult. And of course, I knew who we were interviewing. I watched the thing 2 nights ago, so I knew who went. And when he showed up, I was like, oh, okay. So I enjoyed the documentary, but I couldn't wait to talk to him because the tagline on his publicist is the book tells more than the documentary, and that's what I really wanted to hear. And I'm sorry, Ruwan, if I know we kept asking him about that, but that's what gets you in the podcast circuit on the book. If you say that your book is more than the documentary, you have to come on and tell us why. So. Okay. Thank you, Ruwan. Really, it was just a phenomenal insight into this incredible woman's mind.
Yes.
And am I right? Is this the first real woman cult leader?
I mean, no, there are others. I mean, go back to Seventh-day Adventist. Ellen White was the one who started Seventh-day Adventist, and she was a woman.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I guess so.
There are others. There are some other women cult leaders. It's not as common. And I do think, and I was going to say, in response to that, I think like you were talking about NXIVM and some of the other more sex cults. I think what it is that maybe when it's a woman leader, it comes across a little bit softer and not as gross, or you know what I mean? A woman can do it, and I think it goes a little bit more under the radar.
Ick feeling.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think that she had that ability to do and say some of the same things that if a man was up there doing and saying some of those same things, everyone would be shuddering. Right?
Didn't have so the NXIVM and all the other men's sex, they have the ick feeling. They have that disgusting, especially if they were using underage women. That none of that was going on here, and so it made her look. No. Listen, the New York Times and Bloomberg.
Did you catch that quote that she said on there, though, Andrew, when she was talking about her dad being in prison for molesting, for 52 counts of child molestation? And then she made some comment that her dad really didn't do anything wrong, and that on a different level and a different plane of existence, what he was doing wasn't really a bad thing. Did you catch that quote in the documentary?
I remember that.
Yeah, and that is something, if a man had said that, everybody in the room would have been like,
oh my God.
Yeah, what the hell is he talking about? He's condoning child abuse. And she basically said that, made that quote, and was condoning child abuse.
But coming from a woman, it didn't sound
quite as it wasn't. Yes, exactly. But I did catch it, and I was like, ooh, that's icky. I don't like that.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So, but yes, Ruwan, we want to thank him so much for coming on the show. We do appreciate him taking the time and coming here, and we want to thank all of you as well for tuning into Cultimatum. We always appreciate your support in our mission to expose the truth and highlight the voices of these survivors.
If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
You can also follow Cultimatum on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for more content and updates.
Don't forget to join our Facebook group, Cultimatum Podcast, where we dive deeper into these important topics.
And if you are looking for additional support as a cult survivor, we do recommend joining the Cult Escape and Healing group on Facebook as well.
And if you're interested in more of my work, please check out my website, brand new updated website, anonymousandrewpodcaststudios.com. You go over there. There's lots of stuff. There's all of our podcasts. There's a blog. You can contact us. You can get in touch with Melody or I there. So go check that out.
Yes. And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you would like to share with us, you can also email us at cultimatumpodcast or at gmail.com.
And if you'd like to support the show, you can help us cover production costs by buying us a cup of coffee. The links are in the show note. You could donate $5, $10. And now I understand that you can actually buy a monthly or yearly subscription. As much as we would appreciate that, I want to let you know that you don't get anything extra for that. But because some podcasts do have what they call a Patreon, where you subscribe to something and you get more content than the regular people do. We don't do that. So
at least not yet.
Anything you can give, not yet, right?
But we do appreciate every donation. And as always,
Absolutely.
Stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.